Hi, I'm Emily Cavers, and the 1002nd album that I've picked is Ben Folds 5, Whatever and Ever Amen from 1997.
Hi, I'm Jeff Stephen, and you're listening to the 1002nd Album Podcast. I spent 10 years going through the 1001 albums you must hear before you die, and now I'm asking people that are important to me all about the albums that are important to them. Enjoy! This is the 1002nd Album Podcast. I'm Jeff Stephen, and I'm particularly excited for today's episode because it's not every day that one is in the presence of their favorite French horn player. She's a trivia champion, both at the creating of questions and the answering thereof. And some might even say she's the non-fictional Leslie Knope. Please welcome Emily Cavers.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here.
And mutual, I'm sure. So the today's album of choice is Ben Folds 5, Whatever and Ever Amen. And if we rewind to 1997, Emily and Ben Folds from the top.
So, like a lot of albums from the 1990s, I discovered Ben Folds from the Columbia House catalog.
Yes.
So I teared my little perforated stamp and stuck it on and got 20 albums for a penny and, baby's first experience with consumer debt. It was a good way in the 1990s to fill out your CD shelf. And I gotta say, lots of misses through my Columbia House catalog, but I listened to this CD until it wore out. It was just absolutely worth the fraction of a penny that I paid for it.
I love it. And you're so right that was such an early introduction to the vicious fine print, because all we saw was the all caps, 20 for a penny. Yeah. And by the way, you still have to buy 5 at $24.99.
And it was just this anchor that you had to pay for the rest of them for the next 10 years of your life.
Exactly, yes. But when you get ones like this that deliver on the promise, then It makes it all worthwhile.
And speaking of anchors, I just had to own the album that Brick was on.
Of course, yes.
Yeah.
It just had to be done.
That's right, yeah.
I like it. Yeah. So Brick, that would have been my gateway song as well.
Yeah.
And one of the things I think that stood out to me at the time was that there was the absence of guitars.
Yeah.
And so even though, and I know we're both guitar enthusiasts, why do you think these songs, like Brick and like the others, work so well without them?
Well, I mean, they're expressive musicians, especially Ben Folds. He's such an expressive pianist. So, it's just so exciting to hear a guy play sloppy piano. I think you have to really be a talented musician to play your instrument so messily. He just there's songs where he's just mashing the keys, not even attempting to play chords. And so it's so energetic to hear that kind of performance. I'm a classical musician too, and so much of that is about precision and accuracy. And then here's a guy with tight vocal harmonies, complex musical backgrounds, and then just mashing the keyboards in a way that felt really kind of punk rock, even though, as you say, there's no guitars at all. But there's also tons of other instruments. I just made a list of some of the ones that I noted. This album features some guitar on a few tracks, clarinet, trumpet, Hammond organ, melodica, synthesizer, violin. There's really a whole kit and caboodle of stuff going on there.
I like it. Yeah. And that's totally true with the piano doing the talking. And I think of the importance of being earnest. Did you ever read that play or see the movie or anything?
How dare you?
Yes.
Out the one Oscar Wilde property I don't know very well.
Touche. But there's a great line in that early on where one of the characters says, "Anyone can play accurately, but I can play with wonderful feeling." And so, and I think in his case, I think he's able to do both.
Yeah.
Where it's
I'm going to pretend that I know literary references too, Jeff.
Yes.
It's like Shakespeare writing a sonnet. You have to be perfect at it in order to cheat as often as he does. And so when you teach iambic pentameter to kids, they're like, well, that's not iambic pentameter. I'm like, he's only allowed to cheat because he is exceptional.
He's got the license.
He does, yeah, exactly.
I like it.
Yeah.
And yes. So speaking of things that have continued to be beloved over time, one of the things that sticks in my mind was when the Hunger Games film came out. So what was that, maybe 10-ish years ago or so? You had a great line at the time about high-fiving your teenage self for being right all along about Lenny Kravitz. And after revisiting this album this week, I think your teenage self is due for some more crisp high fives. as 25 years later, I still this is better than ever.
Yeah.
And so I guess the sort of takeaway question would be is how is this album, much like Lenny Kravitz, aging so magnificently?
Well, so I think it's interesting for me, as a person who's not very good with lyrics, this is a lyric forward album, and I actually can hear them and I remember them, which is a big deal. Normally I just am like the babas and the doo-doo-doos and I can sing along with those things. But this one, you remember the lyrics, and he didn't really say anything offensive, which a lot of our favorites from the 1990s have stepped in a few times. I would say like Brick is probably the most potentially challenging in terms of like lyric content, because it's like, is this song pro-abortion? Is this song anti-abortion? Did anybody know that it was about abortion at all when they were slow dancing to it in 1997 in the school gymnasium? So that was probably the most divisive of all of the lyrics, but everything else is just like sardonic and quippy one-liners and funny. And I just think the sound is so fresh. Even now, 25 years later, it sounds fresh. It's so different. You think about what was like on the radio in 1997, right? So much like 90s, alt-rock, new metal is coming on the scene, and then suddenly like this piano jam. It's just so fresh. It was so unique, and I think, it's gone through, Ben Folds has gone through so many different iterations in his career since then, but like this is, for me, where it kind of started, and everything you hear him do from now on sounds like some spin on whatever and ever. Amen.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. And in fairness, he does do the bop-bas and doo-doos quite well. So I think it was in Fair where he's like, ba ba ba.
How dare you predict one of my top 5?
I like it. We like to think about his great minds, I guess. But
it's a perfect spot.
Yeah. But it's so true that it was definitely unlike what came before and after, where the Britpop was starting to fade, the new metal, for better or worse, was on the rise, and then the piano trio kicks in.
Yeah, and I mean, like, there's so many later things that he does where he even like references songs from this album. A Cigarette on this record, Fred Jones is the main character of that, and that comes up in Fred Jones Part 2 later, which is perhaps like the saddest song ever written by anyone ever. That's like an instant tearjerker for me. So it's like the Marvel Extended Universe, but like the Ben Folds Extended Cinematic Universe. He mentions these people, and then later it's like, we'll give them their own feature now.
I think it's not quite as catchy an acronym, the BFECU.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a good point. Yeah.
But the marketing team will get on it.
Yeah,
I like
that's
it.
right. Yeah.
But speaking of which, I quite like how the Ben Folds 5 is a trio, and so which is phenomenal as it is.
Yeah.
But I think it might be unfair to try and limit us to a trio of highlights. So if you'll indulge me, if we could go through maybe a top 5 of our favorite moments from the album, and are you up for the countdown format?
Yeah.
So
Shall we do our like 5s and then our 4s?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, since you've already kind of hinted at what my number 5 is, the ba-ba-bas in Fair. It makes a perfect road trip sing-along song. Like this, for me, that is the sound of being 16 and just having your G2 and like getting in the car and being like, this is my space now. Yeah, so.
Nice. As a December birthday, I was one of the last of the G2, but I would be happy to be a passenger.
Condolences.
In such a car.
Yeah.
Nice. For me, my number 5 would be the opening lyric, where I find, like, as an English enthusiast as well, the first sentence of books are always like the call me Ishmael, or it was the best of times, or that sort of thing. And the lyric here where it's September 75, I was 47 inches high. And as a math fan as well, I was like, 47, okay, so that would be, he's this now. So immediately he's got my attention and just had that real drive to it as well. So I thought, and I've been singing it nonstop, of course, this week as well. Yeah. So for me, that opening hook, the September 75 lyric, that's my number 5.
Nice. So my number 4 is that this is an album full of sarcastic one-liners that's actually hard to narrow down. Like even the title I thought was just delightful when I first found this. But one of my favorite lines that I think about often is when he says, "You just smile like a bank teller blankly telling me have a nice life." And sometimes, life calls upon you to have that blank sort of smile, and I think I'm doing a Ben Folds right now.
I like bank teller blankly tell. I like that.
Exactly.
That's well written. I like it. Yeah. Nice. For my number 4, actually 4, 3, and 2, we'll go on sort of a trilogy of sorts. And it brought me back to now it's not Shakespeare or Oscar Wilde, but have you seen Deadpool 2?
I have.
Nice. But there's a great scene in that where Josh Brolin's character travels through time and he encounters these two people and he says, "Year, what year?" And I found myself sort of saying that a few times in this album because it was from 97, but it
Yeah.
covered a whole, series of decades. And my number 4 brought me back to the roaring 20s of Stevens last night, or Stevens last night. And just the clarinet, and that is magnificent.
Like
It's
almost klezmer clarinet.
just so for me, the that sort of like, it's totally rewinding 70 odd years from its release date, but I thought that was a just lovely choice for number 4.
No, you're totally right. There's like really interesting pulls from different genres in all the songs. Yeah. Oh, so number 3, I'll continue on. The hidden track on the CD version, which you can't get on streaming anymore, which is like so sarcastic and smug. And I guess like, I don't know, I grew up listening to like Jagged Little Pill with the secret song that Alanis does that's just so like angsty and intense and whatever. And this one is just someone in the band saying, I got your secret song right here. Ben Folds is an effing asshole. That was so funny and stupid, and it just delighted me. And so like I still have the CD. When I listen to the CD, you get to have it. And so when you stream it, I'm like, it's someone needs to like swear at me, and then I know.
Once I've been cursed at, then I know.
Yeah, flip through the stacks for something else.
I've got my closure.
It's just so irreverent, and so much of this album is irreverent. So it's just a perfect ending that I think people were expecting some really like intense brick like Dark Night of the Soul, and instead they just flip you off. Have a nice day.
And the misdirect is good. That's nice. And for me, I'll go for the 90s for my my third one as well. Where, like I was saying, it's all over the map. And the one part I think that does put it in its time would be in "Song for the Dumped," where there's that great distorted bass in it. And for me, that screams 90s in the best possible way, because it's that's our beloved decade. And so so in terms of the time travel adventure, the 90s feel to "Song for the Dumped." And it's funny, our mutual friend Scott loaned me his piano book to this song. And one day I got a note, and I of course was a terrible borrower and forgot to give it back, and he left me a gentle note in the mailbox saying, "Oh, by the way, would you mind returning it?" And I secretly hoped he had said, "Give me my music back, give me my music back." You blank.
Know it.
But alas, he was too polite for it. So, but my number 3 would be the distorted bass from "Song for the Dumped."
Okay, well, the symbiosis is just continuing, because my number 2 is also a Song for the Dump moment, and it's the transition between the end of Brick and the opening of Song for the Dump. It ends on this beautiful like piano mellow, and then it's 1, 2, 3, and it just smooshes the piano keys. It's such a jarring, abrupt transition, and this whole album, like song to song to song, is like high low. Super abrupt transitions. Like there's never anything that kind of takes you carefully, but the one between Brick and Song for the Dumped is so abrasive. I love it so much. And like, I don't know. Your first heartbreak when you're in like grade 11 or grade 12. I remember Song for the Dump really like getting me through it. I'm like, yes, do it.
Yes. And it's true. It's definitely not a gentle like and a 1 and a 2. It's
exactly. Just screaming. Yeah.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
But like you said, it is something. And just I'm now visualizing the graph of the like energy over the album. It's like up down.
Exactly,
So like it's not a
perfectly
smooth,
even alternating high and lows the entire time through. It's great.
Yes. And I'm realizing my number 2 fits neatly into that point where like the album opens with that really upbeat what's it like one solemn it's the chat
one angry dwarf and 200 solemn faces.
It's one of something 200 something. That's so up tempo, and then it brings it right down to the for me it was the total sounds of the 70s. Like I'm picturing Carole King, like those beautiful major 7th chords in Fair. And so and then eventually it gets back into the rest, but that's sort of like the really sort of subdued after the really intense opener. I thought those and I've realized that's a weakness of mine. Like if you play a major 7th chord, I'm like, okay, I'm in. Sold. Say no more.
I don't know if that's a weakness. That feels like a pretty good gateway chord to me.
That's right. But so my number 2 would be Fair.
Okay, great. My number 1 is In Evaporated, which I think is the most beautiful song on the album. It's just magical. It kind of sets up a lot of the like nice ballady stuff that he does like later. I think Landed it's not on this record, but it's one of my favorite perhaps my favorite Ben Folds song. But especially in Evaporated, in the bridge, when he sings the lyric, I poured my heart out. And there's that, I don't know, I think sometimes bands miss the bridge. The bridge is often the weak spot. I don't always like harmonically where they go, but this is just like, the chords are perfect, the modulation is perfect, and then the lyrics on top of it, it's like, oh, chef's kiss. You can't get better than that. That's like rewind 10 seconds and listen to that line again.
Yes.
Level for me. Yeah.
That's great. And that's perfect, because you said that's the closer too.
Yeah, well, except for the secret song.
No, but that's it exactly, where it's this beautiful emotional moment.
Yeah. And then one more high to balance the low.
So that's brilliant. Yeah. And well said about the importance of the bridge as well. And I maybe that's a bit selfish for me to say, because I was going to talk about the bridge in my number one as well. So.
Great minds.
Yeah. But yeah, and for me, so my number one, there's a part of me that would want to choose, something else, like, oh, maybe I want to pick more of a hidden gem in the album, but sometimes, the song that introduced you to the group, the song that has that initial resonance, ends up being the most impactful in the end. And for me, it's Brick would be my number one, but specifically the bridge. And so, so nice. I like this one because I'm rather than being a piano player, I like to think of myself as a piano enthusiast or that sort of thing. But it's a fun one to attempt to play. Mm-hmm. But the bridge it's so great with that those suspended chords there, and like the drum, like, even though they're capable of them, the mashing the keys and the distorted bass. In this one, they totally bring it back to the brushes and the upright and the bowing and just the. For me, the bridge makes it, like, as lovely as the verses and chorus are, just that bridge is just something else. And so so that would be my number one, the bridge in Brick.
So two good bridges.
Yeah, I'm sure they were capable of more throughout the album, but those are the standouts. Though, yeah. Nice, but I love those top fives where there is that overlap too, because I think we both dabbled in a bit of Fair, a bit of Song for the Dumped, and so but some others that didn't line up along the way too, which is gold. Yeah. The I guess the sort of the takeaway question of there's all the highlights, there's the roller coaster, but overall, why would you say this is the 1,000-second album that one must hear?
I think this album is smart and fun. It is different than a lot of stuff you're going to hear. Like, if you put your albums on shuffle, your Ben Folds as soon as the first chord comes through the speakers here. It's so distinctive. I think that's really, really unique, and it's just fun. Even the really heartbreaking songs, even the sad songs, like, they feel good to feel so sad. It makes you feel like you're 17 again. And I don't know, this has been basically in the rotation for me nonstop since 1997. Like, I don't think I've stopped listening to this for longer than a couple of months ever. It doesn't get old, doesn't get dusty. It's so, like, fresh every time through. So.
Yeah, I like that. And it's not that it's sort of the nostalgia, and they're like, oh, this is what meant something to me when I was a teen. It's like, no, this has continued to
I listened to the Venga Buses coming in 1997 too, so holds up a little bit better over the long course of time.
And so I did have that thought with what's the name, Kate, where he's referencing what do you say, her mixtape's a masterpiece. And I'm thinking of some of those mixtapes I made where some of them had some masterpiece moments, but they might not have had the overall cohesiveness.
I found an old mixtape recently. I'm like, why is there so much Moby on this?
It was a different era.
We live, you learn, you get better.
Alanis Morissette. Jagged Little Pill.
Speaking of the 90s.
I like it. But the 90s, you're right, they were a golden age for the hidden tracks.
Totally.
I like it. The you mentioned a couple of the other tunes, like Fred Jones, too. Like, so, have you explored much in the rest of the catalog at all?
Yeah, I don't tend to go album by album for the rest of the Ben Folds discography, because then it's sort of like the streaming era came in, and so. But there are lots of really great, and he only did, I think, 2 more albums as Ben Folds 5 before he started doing kind of solo stuff, and then he's did that great collaboration with Regina Spektor that was really beautiful too. But yeah, lots of like later stuff. Alice Childress is a banger. Fred and Sarah. Well, the Suburbs came after, and that was really, really... Or Rock in the Suburbs. The Suburbs is Arcade Fire.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's a suburban
that's
field.
It. The suburbs are involved. I don't know. I don't live in the suburbs. So I think he's still done really interesting stuff. It gets more polished. I think that you lose some of that, like, rough, like, sloppiness from the beginning. Like, as I was kind of just looking up some fun facts about this album, because I am the queen of a fun fact. They recorded this all like in a house, and so his whole point was like, you can't really have a clean recording in a house. Like if it's a perfect take and then like the floorboards squeak, the floorboard squeaking is in there, so you get a lot of that really raw stuff. Like it's almost like, you know, Headley Grange, like recording in these spaces where it's never going to be perfect, but it is going to be exciting.
Yes.
So I think you get that in this album that you don't necessarily in his later stuff. It's much more polished, like studio. His playing is still really like ragged, or like when he wants it to be, but you don't get that like really kind of immediacy of like somebody yelling woo underneath the line or whatever. So yeah,
I like it, and I'd like to think this podcast setup has that rawness of if you hear, you know, a drink glass hit the table, that it's staying in. So,
are we basically Led Zeppelin?
I think that's the takeaway message. Speaking of the sort of the rawness or the power, have you ever had a chance to see him live before? I must admit, it was one of my favorite shows where it was Sean Lennon, who at the time I wasn't familiar with beyond the surname. I've heard once or twice before.
That one's pretty famous.
And then he was the middle act, and then, or it was Ben Folds Fives was the middle act, and then Beck after that.
Yeah.
And it would have been somewhere probably in the 98, 99, because I think Beck was doing Midnight Vultures, and they would have probably been supporting this one still. And it was one of those great shows because when the non-headliner like ends up having just humongous energy, then that's always the sign of a great performance. And so at least 24 years ago, he was amazing. I'd imagine he'd still
I would have been so jealous of you in 1999. I am now too.
But the lawn seats at the Molson Amphitheater, that sort of thing.
That'd be so much fun.
But that's fun. But no, I think I'm certainly convinced that that this is definitely a 1,000-second album material. And a huge thank you, Emily Cavers, for coming today. And
it's my pleasure.
And until the next time. This has been the 1,000-second album podcast. Thanks for sharing some of your time, energy, and attention with us today. Take care.